I was originally going to talk about psychology and the psychology of the designer and the limitations and constraints that our brains place on us as creative people. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but really it's awful to hear your own voice standing on stage. I thought it would be interesting to talk about complexity and a few case studies in complexity and how the interaction of complex situations, problem spaces, and these limited brains work out. So this is the Earth. Just kidding. This is a project that I worked on to help network intrusion be more easily detectable. This was Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's like DARPA's little brother, so we don't do the really cool robots and stuff. But we needed to have a way to help people make sense of really complex data and very heterogeneous data. And so we developed this mechanism where there's flexibility to talk about what kinds of problems people are experiencing, what kinds of events are happening in an environment, where they're happening in an environment, and when they're happening in this given environment. So you can see when we had this reverse tree ring metaphor, so old events kind of flow out, where things happen inside of a network, shows in the middle, and then what the event is around this ring. And we'll see in an implementation how this ring provides a lot of flexibility for showing some interesting information. So in this case, every ring is a 5-minute segment of time. And you can see that there are different classes of things that are happening. There are Windows events, FTP alerts, HTTP alerts, and then these snort alerts, which is an aggregate of different kinds of things that happen, and then these trigger in various places inside of a network. As more events of a particular type happen on a particular place, the little line gets fatter. You can see fat lines. And as more types of events happen at a different place, that node gets bigger. And so you'll see if we filtered out, say, events that are less than some threshold, or we filtered out events that only have one kind, because one kind is likely to have some kind of false positive indicator. So there is one event where there are 5 or 6 different kinds of events happening. By the way, I think it's this one. These are porn alerts. Anyway, and so this is a good overview, and then you have different kinds of sensors where you see these events happen. So we implemented this, and I think I need to probably push play here. We went to Rome, New York. Is anyone here from the Rome, New York area, or Utica has any connection? Yeah. My wife's from upstate New York. It's a great place. We went there in the dead of winter. That was awful. And installed this system, and they played a game of capture the flag. And it doesn't look as awesome as what we had designed, but watch here for a second. You can't really see the map underneath there. They're going to scan for vulnerabilities, and then they find something. And in a game of capture the flag, the objective is to take more information from the other team than they take from you. And so I've got this, oh, wow, we're good. So here's a freeze frame of this scan, and then you can see the one node that had the most vulnerability or the opportunity for them to compromise the other team. And then we added this concept of the top talkers, the external IP addresses that generate the most alerts on the system, and we just inserted that as a piece of pie. And the circle gets really flexible. You can add more pieces of pie. And then that's good because you have more corroborating information. Okay, that's that one. I wanted to tell you a little bit of story about that. And this is a cognitive psychology thing that I think I've faced, a lesson learned. Maybe I'll stay over here. We spend a lot of time working on solutions for our audience. And I fell into this trap of, oh yeah, these poor people, you don't get to see my face as much. Hi. I fell into this trap of thinking that the people that are going to use this are going to spend their whole lives in here. And I was convinced this was true, especially when we went and sat down and Jim, this network intrusion analyst, he had a 3 screens wide spreadsheet. And that's how he looked for information. I was like, oh, home run. And so he installed this, looked more like this at the time. And he looked at it, right-clicked on one of these, looked at the information, copy-pasted, Alt-Tab, back over to his spreadsheet, and spent the rest of our time looking at his spreadsheet. I was devastated. Jim, what happened? He said, I used to spend 45 minutes looking for that information, and it took me about 30 seconds to find it. This is huge advancement for us. And it was a good lesson for me to remember that what I think people are going to be doing is not what they're going to be doing. That doesn't mean that I didn't provide some benefit, and that we don't provide benefit for people as we engage with their problem space. We are going to make a difference. So there's this concept of present focus bias. Has anybody ever heard of present focus bias? It's the reason people text and drive. It's the dumbest thing you can do, but people still do it. Why? Because they think this present focus is more important than anything else they're doing. And it happens a lot. We're going to talk about this one again. But first, we're going to talk about the Earth and a project that I was not involved with, one that I think is one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, innovative things I've ever seen. Does anybody recognize this very famous place? Say it. Huh? New York. That's right. That's the island of Manhattan. How did somebody do that? Who knows, you've seen this, the Manhattan Project. Manhattan is the Lenape word for Manhattan. The Lenape were the indigenous inhabitants of this area when in 1609 Henry Hudson sailed his little boat up the Hudson River. It wasn't called Hudson when he got there. That was later. What does it take? Actually, let's back up a bit. Why would somebody want to do this? And is this simply a Photoshop exercise where you just like do your little Bob Ross on the computer? Happy trees, happy trees, happy trees, happy trees. No, that's not. It's much more interesting than that. The goals of Eric Sanderson and his team, or the goal, I think is really, really interesting. The goal is to understand ecosystems, and we're all hopefully operating in interesting ecosystems. Understand ecosystems at such a level that you can say what is going well, what we lack, where we can improve, and translating that information into, here's the word, experiences that enable people to discover the special ecology of their place. To enable people to discover what's special or discover the fascinating nuances and richness of their ecosystem. You can't just do happy trees. You got to know everything about that. So if we wanted to, if we were working with Eric Sanderson, PhD, what would we need to know to get the information that enables experiences? What sort of information would we look for? Just throw it out. I'm going to wait. Okay, hydrologic systems. He said tides. Good. Species, yes, very good. Anything else? Climate cycles, yes, weather, very important. Geology, yeah. I think actually we were pretty close. Oh, this is another really cool rendering. Isn't that so cool to look at? I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up locally here. I would sit out on the foothills and just think, what did this look like before anybody got here? And I always wonder about the special ecology of this place. This is just such an evocative way to think about it. Okay, so geologic systems, hydrologic systems, animals, plants, the species, the weather, all of this information figures into creating an understanding of how people experience things. Okay, I don't remember why I have the blank slide here. Okay, yes. Take a guess. Let's just focus on the species thing I think you mentioned. How many species do you think, write it down if you can, how many species do you think were living in and around the island of Manhattan in 1609? No, it's not two. 200,000? 12,000?
12,025.
It's tricky. Okay, now, think about it for a second. If I said, okay, this is the island of Manhattan, it's right there. How big is that? Well, if you were in San Francisco, it's that big, or if you were in San Jose, it's that big. If you're in Salt Lake, it's that big. By the way, that's the University of Utah up there by the Salt Lake City. That's Rio Tinto Stadium. So do you think 12,000, 200,000 species would fit in there? What if you kind of break it down? Okay, how many mammals? How many birds, reptiles, amphibians? We're going to get to 20,000. We're going to get to 12,000. If you add insects, I guarantee you'll get there. There are an estimated 93,000 species of insects known in the United States of America, and 73,000 they estimate they don't know, which is a pretty amazing number in 2016. Okay, so these are the actual numbers. Kind of interesting. Also, how many of you didn't think of fish? How many of you didn't think of dolphins, whales, seals? They all lived there. And you take this information and then you add the other information. And you've got to build up this richness. And there's a reason why you've got to build up this richness, and we'll talk about it in a second. This is a map from 1782. It's called the British Headquarters Map. When the British, during the Revolutionary War, kind of took over the island of Manhattan, they didn't have anything better to do, so they made a really big-ass map. This thing is like as big as this stage. It's huge, huge. This is the most detailed early information about the island of Manhattan, and the Manhattan Project, Eric and his team used that information and this information and some other information, and they started to build up a GIS model of this thing, and they started to put it all together. Okay, if you've got beavers, then you're going to need willows, you're going to need streams, you're going to need aspen. Aspen and willow only grow in these kinds of soils for the geology part. And bobcats eat beavers, and so bobcats are dependent on all this stuff, and it starts to look like this. This is actually the data of the ecosystems and the interactions of all of those points on the island of Manhattan. And the cool thing about that is this sense of interconnectedness. And as a designer, if you gloss over interconnectedness, you're missing the really good stuff, or a product manager, or an engineer, or whatever. I refuse to read what's on the slide, so go ahead. So there are 55 neighborhoods in 1606 Manhattan that make it possible for someone to say with confidence, this is what it looked like. And that kind of confidence, if you had that kind of confidence when you were talking about experiences that you were going to create for your audience, you would be guaranteed to make great, great products. beautiful products, evocative, compelling, enriching products. So we'll talk about another project. This one is one that I did work on. Matt, don't f this up, okay? Because I'm not on this anymore. This is the learning management system that we built at Instructure for corporate organizations. Instructure makes Canvas for the edu space, and Bridge is a relatively new product in the corporate space. And you think about learning management systems, corporate learning. We've got some innovators here in the corporate learning space. There's a special set of problems. There are a special set of beavers and bobcats and aspens and willows that you have to understand to make a great product. And these are some of the high order functions that would go into, or that we built into the system. Now I want you to look at this list. Use your little brains. Look at this list and think, if I was going to make something innovative in a learning management space, where would I do it? What would be the coolest thing to change? So look at it for a second. The other question is this: which of these is the most complex? Which of these is the hardest to make a change in? Easy learning? Okay. Well, yeah, cognition is a bugger. What else? So I can't change cognition, but what I can do is make it really easy for someone to say, oh, I'm supposed to learn something, and then I show them a big, vast catalog of all the things they could learn. And that's a bad idea. I just show them what's next, and that was the principle. What's next? One thing. Focus on one. Okay, so I'm going to show you something here that indicates some level of complexity, because we worked on all these things. So this is kind of how much effort over time it took to develop capabilities in these spaces. It's pretty obvious that course management represents the most complexity. And maybe it's a bit of a cheat. The word management's always going to be shorthand for there's crazy happening in here and we have to figure it out. It's true. We'll talk about a couple of these things, and then we'll talk about LaShonda, who was the director of corporate learning at a very big media company, and what was interesting to her. Okay, Bridge. This was going to be our actual marketing tagline. Zach is the tech lead down here in the bottom left. This is our family portrait. That's when we got married. Our family picture. Okay, back to here. So first next level thing is adding learners. How many of you have ever worked in a system where you needed to import tabular data into the system? It's awesome, right? It's elegant, works every time. Well, it'll work if you just download our template first and then copy your data and put it in this format. That's going to work for you every time, guaranteed. That's dumb. Don't do that. So if you've ever had to import some data, like learners, for example, so you click learners, pops up this screen, you drag and drop a little CSV. We dropped it here. I can't really see it very well. Anyway, there's a thing that says, oh yeah, this data has headers. There it is. Oh, this has a laser pointer. No. And then there are the existing objects, fields in the system. So you've got full name, first and last, because I don't know if there's like first and last name in one column. Full name, last and first, I don't know. First name separate, last name separate, email separate. And then we have actually a plus button where you could create new fields in the system, just like that. And so then you drag this over there, and you're like, oh yeah, well, this is the email field. Done. This blew people's minds. And it's pretty cool, because it's super elegant and very simple. So there's your email. When you say you're done, the data gets sucked into the system the right way. Next level. Other next level thing is authoring, and the particular component of authoring. We built this so that you author, and it's flexible enough that this can go anywhere, fits on the phone. You don't have to think about where it goes. Fits on a computer screen, tablet, whatever. I'm going to create a question really quick here, and you're going to come on this journey with me. Stick with me, it goes fast. So we're going to add a new question. We're going to hit that Q button over there, and we're going to pick a kind of question. We have 3 types, or we could make our own. If you put in vocabulary, it's just a term and definition, term and definition, term and definition, and you do that a bunch of times, then you're actually creating questions without actually knowing it. Because you're focused on what you want people to learn, not writing some dumb question. List similar, and we're going to pick this thing over here, fact. So here's a fact. I'm going to type it in. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. Done. And I could go away now, and I have, without any additional effort, a true-false question. So when somebody comes through here and says, Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, true or false? Well, it's true, we know that. But I can also hit Jupiter, and I add what's called a distractor, put Saturn, put Uranus in there. And now I have 3 true-false questions and 1 multiple-choice question without doing anything else. Okay, cool. But I wanted to do a multiple-choice question on some other concept. So I hit that plus button, and now solar system is an idea. And I click it again, and I put in galaxy or universe, and now I have 6 true-false questions and 2 multiple-choice questions, and I can keep going. And I can get up to about 30 questions in almost no time at all. So that's cool, next level. This one's smart assignments. And this is the LaShonda at NBC Universal saying, it does what now? What it does, LaShonda. As a manager, you're over here, you've got a couple of things you can pick on. You can pick on learners, you can manage them individually, you can manage them as groups, you can manage curricular, you can manage courses. Courses roll up into curricula, learners roll up into groups. And it's really hard to show because it just works. If you add someone into, or you add a course into a curriculum like this, healthcare technology, and it's about the clinical device management system. And then you've got a group over here of IT that has to take that curricula. If they're taking the course and midstream they change job to some other department, they're taking a course, well, based on the design principle of what's next, one thing. What should happen with the course that's no longer required? It's no longer required, we'll put it down in your optional list. It just happens. It does what now? And so then the same thing happens with groups. If I create, did I lose my smart group? Oh, here's my smart group. I can create groups based on criteria. If criteria change, people move in and out of groups. They're going to be assigned to courses or not. And the one thing they have to do next is always right there at the top. Now, the lesson learned here that is really interesting is there are, of course, the class of problems that your audience knows they have. LaShonda knows she has a problem when it comes to managing learning for 30,000 people. It's really annoying to try and do that on a kind of like one-by-one basis. And it's really annoying to manage learners and groups of learners and the things that should happen in between there. So that's a known problem. The CSV import thing is a known problem. How do we create nitrous-laden question banks in no time at all was never something that LaShonda or anybody else ever thought of. So there are these new opportunities of innovation. There's this little slice in the middle that's this one, which is solving known problems in really novel ways. And the only way, I believe, you can solve known problems in really novel ways, the problems that matter to your audience, is to know about all of those interconnections, to think deeply and critically about relationships and interplay between them. And that's why course management is the most complex, but to LaShonda, the most important thing. That question bank thing she saw, she's like, wow, that's cool. And we thought it was the most innovative thing anybody to ever see. Anyway, We could talk some more, but I think I'll go ahead and wrap up. The point is this: things are complex. And when we were working on this complex, very hard thing, we had this instinct. You put all this up on the whiteboard, and you think, this is just too hard. This is too much. How many of you have been there? You're looking at the problem, you're like, we're way overthinking this. The resistance to getting to simplicity on the other side of complexity goes up like this over time. As you get into it, it's really, really hard, and you think, no, we don't understand. We're overcomplicating it. You're wrong. You have to keep going. Because to get to something that's worth really investing in, that's worth it to your customers, to your audience, to put their time and attention in, you have to get to simplicity on the other side of complexity. Otherwise, it's not worth a fig. Thanks.